So good evening and welcome to our Literary Cafe. My name is Helen Liu and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like today's event to you. The Literary Cafe was created by the foundation and they are pleased to collaborate with Marjan Kamali on this series. I would also like to thank the public libraries in Ashland, Franklin, and the Peabody Institute in Danvers for partnering with us on this program. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please raise your hand if you are here in person. We're also running this program in a hybrid format, so everyone on Zoom, if you would like to have a question answered, please submit it to the Q&A. Now I'd like to introduce, before I get to that, books by our authors are available for purchase with Brian from Maxima in the back right there. Our authors will be happy to sign your books after the program. Now I'd like to introduce our host. Marjan Kamali is the author of the national bestseller, The Stationery Shop, which is being adapted into an HBO series, Get Together Tea, which was a Massachusetts Book Award finalist. Her novels have been translated in over 20 languages. Born in Turkey to Iranian parents, Kamali spent her childhood in Turkey, Iran, Germany, Kenya, and the US. She holds a bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of California, Berkeley, an MBA from Columbia University, and a Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing from New York University. She is a 2022 recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship. She currently teaches creative writing at Grub Street and lives in Boston with her family. Please join me in welcoming Marjan, who is going to introduce our special guest this evening, Phillippi Ryan.
Can I just ask you?
You think I would know how to do that? Can I just ask you, and I know you're going to introduce me, I don't mean to step on you, but an HBO series?
Yes.
So we want to hear about it.
Well, it's in the works. We'll chat, but I have so much to ask
I
you.
know, but you
Yes.
can't, I mean, everybody in this audience is saying, what HBO, what's going to happen? So how close is it?
It's in the very, very early stages. So
Was it so exciting?
it was so exciting. It was supremely exciting. Dream come true. But it's super exciting to be with you here tonight. I'm not kidding. I'm a bit fangirling because I admire Hank so much. Not just because of her writing, but because I think, Hank, you're one of the people who, whenever anyone spends time with you, they come away from it feeling a little bit better. Yes, I totally believe that. I first met Hank many years ago at the Salem Literary Festival, and she was the keynote speaker. And she talked about how she used to read Nancy Drew mysteries as a young girl in the loft of the barn. And that's when her love of reading really developed. So that's who I think of when I think of Hank. But I'm gonna read your bio because that makes HBO look like nothing. Okay, so Hank Phillippi Ryan is the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. She has also won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 5 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Morrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. National book reviews have called Hank a master at crafting suspenseful mysteries, I will attest to that, and a superb and gifted storyteller. Very true. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple Magazine, and others. Her current book is Her Perfect Life, which we're going to discuss a bit tonight, a chilling psychological standalone about fame, family, and revenge. It received starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, which called it a superlative thriller and was an Agatha Award nominee for Best Novel. Her upcoming thriller is The House Guest, and that's coming in February. So Hank, welcome, welcome. Now, as always, with our literary cafe, the idea is that nobody needs to have read the book in order to enjoy our conversation. So you don't need to have read the book like I did. staying up all night. Thanks, Hank. But I have so many questions to ask you about her perfect life, which I will do without giving a single thing away, no spoilers. But first, I just want to ask you a little bit about the trajectory of this career of yours, because you've been on television for over 40 years, and now you're this best-selling novelist. And I was curious, like, what made you decide you're going to write novels?
You know, I think that, you have to go back to Nancy Drew in the barn. I really think you do. And it's kind of interesting to unpack a life to see how things happened. And I can tell you that nothing was planned. Absolutely nothing was planned. I was a really geeky, nerdy little girl, the most unhappy 14-year-old you could ever possibly imagine. And I had no friends, no fun, no anything. All I did was read up in the hayloft, as Marjan said, up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house, and watch old movies. And my parents thought I was doomed, that I was just going to never be happy or successful or have any friends, since I didn't. So with that reading and old movies has served me well now, I do have to say. So I started reading Nancy Drew. Speaking of libraries, my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library in Zionsville, Indiana, and we would fill up our saddlebags with books and then read up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house. And that's where I fell in love with storytelling. In answer to your question, that's your first question, that's where I fell in love with storytelling. And Nancy Drew and Sherlock Holmes, I read every single Sherlock Holmes short story and novella. I love that you're all nodding like this, you did that too. And then I remember so clearly reading Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Do you remember that? And if you haven't, just not right now, but later, go home and read that. And I thought, how could she do that? How can she weave this story and have you turn the pages as fast as you possibly could, and then give that ending that you never could have thought of? And then when you go back and read it, it's all there. We could have figured it out. She was so fair. And I thought, I wish I could do that. I wish I could tell a story that was so immersive and so propulsive, and then in the end, so compelling and so surprising, and yet so inevitable, a fair mystery that you could figure out. And then at some point, I thought, well, maybe it would be more fun to be Poirot than to write about Poirot. Maybe I would be a detective rather than write a mystery, but I didn't know. So then there was this real pivotal point in my life, which looking back is when you realize it, but when you're having the moment, you don't really know. We all have those. In middle school, we call it the junior high. In middle school, they had superlatives like best dressed. Do they still do that? Most likely to succeed, most popular? No, not anymore. That's wise. They voted me most individual. No, that's not good. When you're 14 and you just want to be like everyone else, you're like, please make me be like everyone else. And I knew what that meant, most individual. That meant weirdest kid. Most, we don't want to sit with you at lunch, right? That's what that was. And I came home and I was incredibly upset, as only a 14-year-old can be. And I was crying to my mom and said, they can't do this to me, it's not fair, the world isn't fair, they can't do this to me, it's not fair. We all said this. And my mom cuddled me, as moms do if we're lucky. And then in the end, she took me aside and she said, sweetheart, you're griping that the world isn't fair. She said, let me tell you, kiddo, the world isn't fair. The world isn't fair. And she said, and you're just going to have to get used to it. And I remember thinking, why? Why do I have to get used to it? Why can't I do something about it? Why can't I make sure that other people aren't as unhappy as I am right now? I'm going to stand up for people. And I decided, when I was 14, I decided I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make a difference in however a 14-year-old thinks. I'm gonna make a difference, I'm gonna leave a legacy, I'm gonna have it matter that I existed. So now, I didn't do that right away. I went off to college and I was a Shakespeare major, and again, my parents were like, oh, honey, you are never gonna get a job in your life. This is completely worthless, but I loved it. And then I went into politics. I hate to say that word, but I worked in several political campaigns back home in Indiana. But none of the candidates I ever worked for actually won. Not one, unfortunately. And that is when, if you listen to the universe, which I do, the universe was saying, find another career. So that's when, I know this is the world's longest answer, and forgive me, that's when I went to the biggest radio station in Indianapolis. I decided I was going to be a journalist, and I was going to change the world. But see, it has a meaning. I was going to change the world by being a reporter, which was a good idea, except I didn't know how to be a reporter. So I go to this news director. It's 1970, and that's really important to remember. Go to this news director and say, I'm here to apply for this job, if you have an opening for a radio reporter. And the guy says, the news director says, well, sure, yeah, we do. What was your last radio reporting job? And I say, well, no, I haven't ever been a radio reporter. He says, that's okay. Newspapers? No. Magazine? No. Television? No. He looks at me like, have you ever been a reporter at all? No. And we go through this whole big rigmarole, which, journalism school, no. Journalism classes, no. School paper, no. He says, when you were a little girl, did you hand out mimeographs? No, nothing. So finally he says, you seem like a nice young woman. I was 20. You seem like a nice young woman. And I bet I could teach you how to be a reporter, but I just don't have time to do that. He says, can you tell me one good reason why I should hire you? And I said, yes, I can. I said, your license is up for renewal at the Federal Communications Commission right now, and you don't have any women working here. And then I just smiled, and the next day I had my first job. Now, remember, that was 1970, and Jane Pauley, Jane Pauley calls us the class of 1970. Seriously, the women who started in broadcasting, Jane Pauley, Leslie Stahl, Jessica Savage, we all got our jobs because we were women. There's no question about it. That's why. But we couldn't keep them because we were women. So I'm really proud to be part of the sort of breaking up the gender barrier in broadcasting all those years before. But then fast forwarding, so I was a reporter in Washington, D.C., in Atlanta, and Indianapolis, and then came to Boston in '83. And one day at Channel 7, I was 55 at the time, so that was, how many years ago was that? 13, something like that? No, yeah, farther than that. Anyway, might be 15. I just had a good idea for a novel.
Just now, this minute?
No,
Okay.
I wish. No, 15 in 2004, whatever that was. And I just was filled with this idea that I could do this. I mean, you know that feeling when you have a good idea. And I came home and I said to Jonathan, sweetheart, I've got a good idea for a book. I'm gonna write a novel. And Jonathan, who's so supportive and so enthusiastic, says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a book? And I'm like, how hard can it be? I've read a million of these. And I soon learned how hard it could be, but I was devoted. I knew it was a good idea. I was obsessed. And that turned out to be Prime Time, which is my first novel, which won the Agatha for Best First Mystery, and that was the beginning of my career as a fiction writer. No jokes about television. But it was just that, you can't separate that moment from all that went before it. Don't you think? I mean, that's so interesting that.
No, definitely. And now, 14 books later, here we are. And I wonder, Hank, because having read your work, it's hard for me to believe but yet I can believe that you felt at one point you couldn't write a novel, because it's very effortless, it's very natural. There are books you read that you slog through, let's all face it. And then there's books like yours where you're just like, everybody shut up and let me get back to my book, because you just want to get back to your book. I'm curious, Hank, two questions. How much did your work as an investigative journalist sort of maybe help you as a crime writer, A, and B, this is the question of the moment, do you plot your books ahead of time? Because when one reads them, it is incredibly suspenseful, and I'm very curious whether you're a plotter, or as we say, a pantser, someone who writes the first draft, at least by the seat of their pants.
Well, I think it's such a good question, and I think it's so fascinating because that's sort of unpacking how a writer's mind works, how something evolves and develops. But first, you remember, as a television reporter and as an investigative reporter, I'm out looking for the story. So let me answer the second part first. I do not plan my stories. I have no idea what's going to happen. Now I have a sort of an idea of the beginning, and then I just type chapter 1, and I think, okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. And that I can't wait to see what happens every day. And I know that that's what gets me to the computer, is I think, ooh, I can't wait to see what happens. And the only way that I can figure that out is by having me write it, because it's my book. So that's what gets me, as I said, that's what gets me writing every day. The idea that I need to know, which sounds like a reporter, right? It sounds like And so people say to me, wow, the twists and turns in Her Perfect Life, you really surprised me. And I think, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? Could you believe that happened? Because, talk about a surprise ending. I surprise myself. I surprise myself every day. And I really think that that's part of the magic of it. Now, it's a tightrope, isn't it? It's a risk. It's a weird kind of naive confidence to be able to not know what you're going to write and just sit down at the computer anyway and have this sort of weird faith in the process that you know how to tell a story. And that's what brings me to the other half of your wonderful question, which is, if you think about being a television reporter, as I said, I'm looking for the story every day. I'm out in search of the story. That's what being a reporter is, being in search of the story. So I have no fear. I have fear every day, but I have, confidence in the big picture that I'll be able to find the story. But think about this. I've been telling a story essentially every day for the past 43 years on television. A story with a beginning, middle, and an end, with a character you care about, with a problem, an important problem that needs to be solved, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. And in the end, you get some justice and you get to change the world. Now, that's exactly what I do in investigative reporting. I go out and find the story, and that's my template. And in writing fiction, that's exactly the same thing. So that rhythm of telling a story remains, whether it's fact or fiction. And when you say that you couldn't put it down, which is, of course, the best thing that anybody ever could say in the possible universe, I write my books like I write my television stories. I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on. How easy it's to go boring, 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 boring. I don't want that. I want you to miss your stop on the T when there used to be a T. I want you to miss your stop on the T because you just can't wait, because you forget where you are. That's the whole point. You know that, and your books are like that too. You're so involved, you're so invested, you're so curious that you can't wait to find out what happens. So I insist to you that that's television writing training.
I believe it. And the thing is, I read somewhere you said you used to read the Sherlock Holmes stories, which you were telling us about under the covers at night. And I was doing that with this book. My poor husband, the light kept coming on because my little reading lamp thing wasn't enough light. But
You have it all marked up.
I have it all marked up.
I want to see
Every
those
page.
marks.
Oh, you could see these marks. Because also when you read as a writer, on the one hand, you're reading and enjoying the story, but on the other hand, I was like, ooh, what's she doing here? Like I was also, kind of excavating some of your plotting, which was
Now that you
fascinating.
know, though, that I didn't know.
Now that I know that you didn't know, I'm even more in awe, to be honest. Because, well, let's talk a little bit about her perfect life, because I have a many questions about this. Why don't you tell the audience what the book is about, because you'll do a better job than me, unless you want me to, which I'm happy to do.
I will, but I would love to hear what you say.
Okay.
Because it's interesting, because when you say, I mean, you should see the markings in this book. It's got like little underlines and
Yeah,
pages flat down.
every page has some writing on
Like, what did she mean by that? I don't
it. No,
Her perfect life stars Lily Atwood. Lily Atwood is a television reporter in Boston. She is so beloved that her fans have created a hashtag for her, Perfect Lily, hashtag Perfect Lily. She's beloved. And Lily has everything that she could possibly want. She has fame, she has fortune, she has Emmys. She's the single mom to a darling 7-year-old daughter. And she's happy and she's great and she's successful, and she also has a deep, dark secret. She is hiding a life-changing, maybe life-ending, career-ending, certainly family-ruining secret. And she is in the spotlight. Lily Atwood is famous. Everybody knows who Lily is, and that may be her biggest problem. Because how do you keep a secret when you're always in the spotlight? And she realizes that the spotlight is the most dangerous place of all. When someone begins to indicate that he or she is about to tell this career-ruining secret, how far will Lily go to protect her perfect life? So it's sort of two smart women facing off in a high-stakes psychological cat and mouse game to prove their truth about a devastating childhood betrayal. But which character is the cat and which character is the mouse? And that is her perfect life.
And that is exactly what I was going to say. When I was going to describe this book. No, that is her perfect life. And I would say it's about, at its core, it's about loss. It's about coming to terms with how one moment, one decision can completely alter the trajectory of your life. And it's about coming to terms with giving up everything that you've built for yourself career-wise, right? This aura of perfection that Lily has. And there was an interesting sort of exploration of fame, because you write a lot about Lily's fame. She's exalted, she's adored by her fans, but she always feels like she's one hashtag away from total collapse, from being canceled. And I wondered if you could speak to that, because, I mean, Lily is a local news celebrity, and Phillippi Ryan is a global news celebrity, well, novelist. How much did you draw from some of your own experience?
Well, I think it's inevitable to put your own experiences in the book. I mean, that's the life that I've lived, and that whatever book, whoever of you are writing books, we're putting ourselves in the book. That's sort of the point. We have a story to tell. We have some philosophy to reveal, and sometimes it's a little self-referential when it comes to that, because I'm using my own experiences, of course, and I have been there and seen that and talked to those people and been around that. I've been thinking about this for so many years. When I started in television in Indianapolis, I was at the laundromat. This is how glamorous my life was at the time. I was at the laundromat doing my laundry. I had been on television for maybe 5 months, something like that, in Indianapolis. And a woman came up to me in the laundromat and said, "Are you Hank Phillippi from TV?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I am." And she said, "Oh, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you something." And part of me said, "Great, this is whatever you have. I'm a reporter. I'd love to hear the story." And the other part of me thought, "I'm doing the laundry, okay? Can you just call me at the office?" But I would never say that. But I said, "Sure, tell me the story." But when I got home, I called my mom. She seems to be my touchstone, I was very lucky with her. And I said, I was whining yet again. I said, Mom, can you believe it? This woman in the laundromat is asking me, talking to me like she knows me. I can't believe it. Expecting this sympathy. And my mother was, silent for a moment. And she said, listen, kiddo, you chose the spotlight. Welcome to the spotlight. And she said, and I never want to hear you complain about that again. And she was so right about that. So I was thinking about that when I was writing Her Perfect Life, thinking, Lily chose the spotlight, and she gets it, and she understands the ramifications of that and the scrutiny, and the one step away, one wrong word step away from being completely canceled and being ruined. And we know this happens. So then I thought, but from the point of view of Lily, her 7-year-old daughter didn't choose the spotlight. Her family didn't choose the spotlight. And by putting herself in the public view all the time, every lipstick, every haircut, every dress, every shoe, every statement, every word, she can never make a mistake, ever make a mistake. Her family didn't choose that. So, and I write thrillers, I write high stakes psychological thrillers. What danger does that put little Rowan in for Lily to be famous? And that was really the point of that. So, and then another absolute element of the story came from absolutely my own experience. When I was the weekend anchor of the news in Atlanta for years, and one night I was driving home after the 11 o'clock news. It was maybe midnight, later than that probably. I was driving home to my little house in Ansley Park. I turn the corner, and there are just blue lights, police cruisers everywhere. So I thought, oh, news story. I'm a reporter, breaking news. So I get closer to the lights, and they're at my house. These blue lights are at my house. The police are at my house. So I, park the car really, really fast, leap out, run to the police officer, nearest police officer, and I say, I'm Phillippi. And he says, yep, I know who you are. And I said, and that's my house. What's happening? And he says, yep, I know it's your house. I said, well, what's going on? What's happened? And he said, we caught a burglar in your house, and that's him in the cruiser that had caught him. And I said, a burglar in my house? Why? And he said, well, he told us why. And he says, do you want to know? And I said, sure. And he said, he knew you were live on television. So he knew you were at home. He knew where I was, so he knew where I wasn't. And he felt very comfortable breaking into my house because I was not home. And how chilling is that? How chilling is that? So I took that for Her Perfect Life as well, because I started thinking, how does he know where I live? Well, how hard would that be? I drive to the television station, my shift is over at 11:30 on Saturday night. He could have followed me home any day. He could know when I'm home. He could know my schedule. I work 3:30 to 11:30, and so that's when I'm coming to work. And I started realizing, and this is way before internet, I started realizing how easy it is to know where someone is, especially if you're on television, especially if you're live. Some of my colleagues have gotten murdered, because they're at places live and people know where they are. You know that happens. So that's real fear. That we don't think about that every day. You couldn't possibly. And I don't think the fear is that imminent. The true danger is that imminent, knock on wood. But there is this constant monitoring and knowledge of where we all are. And so Her Perfect Life, of course, is ironic because it seems like it must be, but of course it is not.
No, it isn't. And with social media, that's amplified and multiplied. For example, tonight, you and I broadcast to the planet. We're going to be at Cary Library at 7:30. Anyone who follows authors or reporters on social media, they by definition know where they are. We can be found. So social media plays a very crucial role in Her Perfect Life. And one thing that both social media and fame, I feel like you showed so well, the flip sides. They can be incredibly negative, social media and fame, but they can also be very, very positive, because Lily's fame also, no spoilers, but helps save her.
Absolutely.
So, well, I guess that was a minor.
No, it isn't. That's one of
Okay.
my, that's one of my, we know Lily doesn't die.
Okay,
That's-
Lily doesn't die.
That's one of my favorite moments, actually.
Yeah,
But,
me
you know,
too.
when I, thank you.
Yeah.
You'll read it too when you read it. Sign. No pressure, it's just my career. Since I don't know what I'm going to write next, sometimes, and I know you know this, I know Kimberly in the back knows it too, sometimes when you're really writing and you forget that the world is there and you forget that you're writing and the words are just coming and characters are just saying things and you're not even thinking about where it comes from. And when she said that, I thought, oh, that's so great, So there are these little moments of sort of being in the zone when you're writing. I went to an event a couple of years ago in the before times with Stephen King and Lee Child interviewing each other. Can you imagine, like the Pantheon, Olympus? And they each said, sort of unbidden, that there were times, and I wonder if you feel this way, that there were times, not always, but times, when they really felt as if they were just transcribing something that they were that something was getting downloaded. Kimberly's saying yes too, downloading some dialogue or some idea or some action into your head and you don't even know.
I mean, that's the high, right? That's why you do it, to access that feeling where you're lost, you disappear, the characters take over, and you're just transcribing. And then, like you said, people are like, I love how you came up with that. And you're like, I kind of didn't.
And we did. I mean, it's not like woo-woo, but there's a psychology, there's a process of a writer brain. It's our imagination is what that is, which is, so singular to human beings, that imagination. And when you can tap into it somehow, and you can't make it happen, it just, you allow it, right?
But it helps to make it happen if you're engaged with your work. So sometimes I tell my students, they're like, I haven't gotten to that part yet where the book writes itself. And then I'll say, well, how hard have you been working? And they'll say, well, I mean, I haven't really been working on it. So it's like, that's not how it works. You do have to show up.
You do have to show up. There is that. I know that Dennis Lehane used to talk about how he thought about his book so much that when he got home, he was surprised more words weren't written. But I read a quote from someone, it was Ellie Griffiths in her book, The Stranger Diaries. Have you read Ellie Griffiths' The Stranger Diaries? Really good. And there's a line in it from an English teacher. So it's Ellie writing the English teacher and now me quoting a fictional character, which said, the muse only comes when you're working. The muse only comes when you're working. And it just touched me because I thought, that's right.
Yeah.
So I just sit down and say, okay, anytime.
Yeah.
You have to be working.
So it's not like you're playing Mario Kart and the muse is like, here's a great, yeah.
Well, the other thing too, and the other thing you were asking about television, forgive me for interrupting you, but the other thing about television is that when it comes to writing, for years I was a general assignment reporter, and I would come at 9 in the morning, and at 6 o'clock, by 6 o'clock I had to have a little movie on TV, a news story on every day at 6 o'clock. So I said, if I said to my news director, can I be on at 10 after 6 instead of 6, because I'm just sort of not feeling the writing of this story today. How long would I have lasted? So I use that, I channel that when I'm doing my fiction now, is I think, you gotta write your 1,000 words. You can sit here, until you're finished or not, but only you can do that, and you better make your deadline. And that idea of that on a day-to-day basis, what I write doesn't have to be good. I can fix it later. It just has to be there. And then when I get the joy of being able to edit it and fix it and discover what I meant to write, that's what makes the book the book.
Yes, and I think we've had similar mothers, because I was also not really allowed, I'm still not allowed to complain. Never. So, you know, that it's the whole thing of, yeah, life's not fair.
Right.
Get up, you know, and do what you need to do.
And there is a certain truth about that.
Yeah, there is, but it's a little different, I think, than how we coddle kids these days. I'm guilty of it too, where it's like, good standing, good breathing, so proud of you, you know, for every little thing.
Well, that could work.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question before we open it up to the audience, because I know they have questions for you. But Hank, you gave me one of the best pieces of advice a few years ago, because I'm impressed that you write all these books. You have your career on television. We're not even mentioning Hank hosts shows on like online programs like A Mighty Blaze. She's involved with so many mystery organizations. She does a ton of other work too. And I said to you, I said, how do you do it? How do you like just find the time? And you said, see, I whined. Our mothers wouldn't like that. And you said, I just do one thing at a time. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's like hashtag no multitasking.
Yeah, hashtag no multitasking. And I wonder if my husband will agree. But what I try to do in these days where there's so much input, you know, there's all kinds of social media and everything extraneous and people wanting you to do things and things, you know, then there's not only social media things and there's not only your job things and there's only your family things, but then there's this administrative stuff like cooking and cleaning and the laundry and everything. And then there's the procrastination element of it. I mean, there was one day that I didn't want to write so much that I thought, I am going to change the shelf paper in my kitchen. I need to. You know, that's the worst possible time. Nobody wants to ever do that. One day, I honestly, though, did alphabetize my spices, just so I wouldn't have to write. But that's bad. Anyway, so I've learned to focus. I've learned to be very present in what I'm doing at the time. So if I'm at Channel 7, I am at Channel 7 thinking about Channel 7. If I'm at my desk at home, I'm at my desk, and for this amount of time, I'm going to write my pages. I'm not going to go on Facebook, I'm not going to go on Instagram, I'm not going to get into that Coke, I'm not going to look for the mail, I'm not going to go down and do the laundry, I'm not going to do anything else, I'm just going to do this. And it's sometimes I will confess to you, sometimes I set the timer and I say for 34 minutes, I'm going to write and nobody and nothing is going to stop me. And when you force yourself, at least when I do, when I force myself, when I make a promise to myself to do this thing without interruption, it gets done. And then I keep going because I'm in it then. The question is, you know, Stephen King always said, the hardest part is just before you start, because it's so easy not to start. But once you start and do it, then you really have to focus. Now, Jonathan knows that, you know, if I'm watching TV, I'm doing my email at the same time. That does not require, unless Magpie Murders, which is so good that I don't do anything else. But if I'm doing something important, then I do that one thing.
Yeah.
Then I can use every single bit of my energy and intent to do that the best I can possibly do it.
It's super helpful. Ever since you said that to me, I do think that, because sometimes if you look at your to-do list, it's so overwhelming. You think, I can't tackle this, what's the point? But if you just think, okay, I'm going to write this check. Right now, all I'm doing is I'm writing this check. And then all I'm doing is I'm sending this one email, you know, and
I mean, there's a lot to it because you have to get the checkbook, write the check, sign it right, put it properly, find an envelope, get a stamp, put the address on the envelope. There's a lot of steps where you can be derailed.
you can be so derailed.
So
Yeah,
that's why you gotta really focus.
That's why you focus. You're like, I am getting,
Isn't that so sad?
it's so sad. I say things to myself like, you are getting the envelope. You are getting the envelope. I have the envelope. So, because we live in a very fractured world, yeah.
Do you do this? Are we crazy? Don't even.
All right, so one last question about her perfect life. Okay, I know I said I had my last question, but this, I promise, is my last, and we open it up. Did you always intend on ending it this way?
Oh my golly, no. Well,
Okay.
first of all, I did not intend on ending it anyway, because I didn't know how it was gonna end. But you can see when you're reading the book that there are a couple of ways that it could go.
Yes, and ergo my little notes, because, you know, I like to put in the book my gasps and my guesses. So like at one point I'll say, oh, is she really, you know? Yeah, so.
It's fascinating, it's fascinating. I love when Marjan doesn't finish any sentences, and I'm happy about it, because you can't.
I will not give it away.
It was very tough for me, but I'm trying to think if this is okay, and I think it is. I don't like books when all of my books end. You know what happens, you know who did what, you know the crime is solved, the thing is finished, the relationship thing is finished, the crime is finished, the theme is finished, everything is finished. You're gonna close my book and you think, oh, so that's what happened, okay.
Yes, and then you sit and have some time with yourself for a bit to absorb that, yeah.
But the book, the people in the book go on after the book. Of course, they do, because they had a life before the book and they have a life after the book. You won't know it, and you can only think about what that might be. So the reason I made the decisions I made at the time that I made them was because I wanted it to be real.
Yeah.
That real people had made real choices, as you alluded to earlier, as you alluded to earlier. Real people made real choices that you can't erase, that the dominoes of those choices remain no matter what happens later.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't undo it, and sometimes it's sad, but that is reality.
Actions have consequences, and I like though what you said about when you read Agatha Christie and you felt it's fair. Your books are fair. Like when you know the mystery's solved, when you figure it out, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Because sometimes it's like, oh, well, actually, they were living on Mars, and, you know, it's something so absurd.
Long lost brother from
Yeah.
Australia who comes out on page 352, and you're like, the who?
And you're like, how could I have ever guessed that? That's not fair, because I could never guess that.
Well, I know that my readers are smart. My readers are smart, and they're going to be trying to figure out the story. They're trying to get ahead of me, like
They
you
really
are.
are.
And so I am aware of that as a writer. I'm aware that I need to stay one step or two steps ahead of you, because I know what I think, I know what I think you're thinking.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna put that, but then I know that you're thinking, no, she's not gonna put that, so she's gonna put something else, so I can't put that either. And so that's kind of the fun part for me.
But sometimes you know that we know before the character knows, and you give us that, which is cool.
Yeah,
Because then we
I
wait for the character to catch up to us. Yeah.
And that is fun too, because I want you to feel smart. I want you to realize, yes, you have picked a book that you get, that you're understanding these real characters, and you get this, and you can do this, but you can't get the end, you know? So.
No, but you can get enough that you're a little proud of yourself. Yeah, but you still have that satisfaction of the surprise.
You know, it's funny, my husband and I will keep bringing him up, but he's the only person I've seen for the past 3 years, so that's okay. We'll watch television together, like some sort of crime show together, and I'll say, it's the sister.
Yeah, we always do that. We're always like, he did it,
She's
she did
pregnant.
it.
She's gonna drown. And Jonathan will say, how did you say they're gonna drown? I'm like, there's a swimming pool, I wouldn't have that, you know. And Jonathan says, can't you just watch it? No, I can't just watch it. So can you just watch it?
No, I'm always guessing, but my husband can attest, I always guess wrong with TV shows. I'm like, I know it's her, and then it's like, absolutely. But then that's when they do dumb things like, oh, well, actually, it was somebody from Mars that we never showed you, you know, so that's not fair. Okay, well, you and I could talk all night, but I want to open it up to questions from the audience. I know we have people also watching us on Zoom, but maybe the in-person people could get first dibs if there are any questions for Phillippi Ryan.
Easy, non-controversial questions. Yes.
So I'm Pam. Thank you so much for coming. Hi. So my question is, as much as we enjoy hearing about for Perfect Life. What's next? Do you already have some ideas?
I already have a new book coming out.
Oh, you already
I paid her to. Thank you. Pam, did you say?
have.
Thank you. Yes, my new book comes out February the 7th. It's called The House Guest. The House Guest. And it's sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise.
Oh.
And there are bookmarks up at the counter, so I'm very excited about that. It's about a woman who's been happily married for 8 years to her powerful, rich, good guy husband. He's a fundraiser for charities. And they're very, very happy, she thinks, until one morning he just up and leaves. He just up and walks out. And she begins to realize that he seems to be setting her up to take everything from her friends, her house, her money, her life, her livelihood, everything. Why is this happening? And she really needs a friend. He's taken all the friends. And she really needs a friend. And then on page 1, she finds one, a very seductive new friend who has some problems of her own in her life. And they begin to discuss how they can solve each other's problems. So if you're thinking strangers on a train, don't. I know you are, but it's not. It's Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise, and what might that be?
Oh, gosh. Okay, you're gonna do this to us all over again. I can't wait for that. That sounds amazing.
I'm very excited about it. And when you were talking about earlier, forgive me for this, but you were talking, so you heard how I described it, right? You heard how I described it. A early reader read it, and she said she loved it, that it was a reverse Cinderella story that was riches to rags, where the prince is not so romantic, and will the fairy god best friend be able to change everything back? And I thought, I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought of that, but that is what it is as well. Readers are just so great.
Yeah, they tell you what your book is actually about. All right, anyone else have a question?
Sorry to make you come all the way back. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask, you write that first draft. How much does that change, the first draft that you write, to what your final piece is?
How much does the first draft change to what the final piece is? In some ways, it changes quite a bit. For instance, my first drafts are always about 120,000 words, and my final drafts are always like 100,000 words. And I know that when I'm writing that, because I don't know what's going to happen next. And if you read my first draft, you can see that sometimes they're just the character asking a series of questions. Why would he do that? You know, maybe he wants to go to the library. Maybe he needs some books. Maybe he's really cold. Maybe he doesn't want to stay home anymore. Maybe he doesn't, and the character's trying to figure it out. I mean, that's just me trying to figure it out. And finally the character figures it out, and then I take all that stuff out later. But I need to do that. I need to think it through. So it's a much tighter, the second draft, the final draft is much tighter than the first draft. Also, in the first draft, it's sort of like, you know, those cooking shows where they give you a refrigerator full of stuff, and then you have to figure out how to use the stuff, you know, make dinner out of these items. Well, it's sort of like the first draft is I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff in my refrigerator, things to use. And then in the so that's in the first 100 pages or so. And then as the book progresses, I'm using those items that I put into the beginning of the book and seeing if I can make a picture out of that. It's sort of how I think of it. So in the second draft, in an edited version, I'm going through and seeing which of those ingredients I didn't really need. You know, I can take this out, I can take this whole element out, right? I can take this whole person out. So I really look forward to that editing. That editing is like the treasure hunt for the stuff that my book isn't. So when they talk about killing your darlings, I don't think of those words as darlings. If they're clogging up my pacing or the timing or making my story slow down so that you can put it down, that's what I'm trying to take out. I only want the parts that you're gonna love, and that's what I do in editing. So the story is gonna be essentially the same story. But it might feel different, right? It's hard for me to describe what that is. The motives have become clearer, the motives become clearer, the themes become more entrenched, and the action is faster after I edit it.
Do you ever add anything into the fridge?
Do I ever add
anything, like add
Do
a
I add to the
character?
fridge? Yes, I definitely do. I definitely do, because one of the things that happens is you begin to create a story, and then if you're lucky, at about 4/5 of the way through the book, you realize the story that you're writing. You think, oh, that's what this is about. I get it now. And then you have to go back. You get to go back and put the ingredients in that.
That was your mother's voice. You get to go back. It's a privilege to go back.
Yes, well, it is, because she was right, she knew. Because it's like the little nugget, that little puzzle piece that you didn't know you needed. And then when you have it and you stick it in and the Rubik's Cube is done, and that's really great. So that you look for that. Are you writing? Because that's a real writerly question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I'm just wondering, do you have early readers that read it and give you feedback, or do you just kind of go on it yourself?
Do I have early readers, or do I just go on it myself? I hesitate to tell you this, but I do not have early readers. I do not. And I'm so sorry, because I know you're supposed to, and I know it's a good thing, but I have worked in television for so long with so many people with their hands on my story. My editor, my producer, and the executive producer, and the news director, and you should do it this way, you should do it this way. Can it be more investigative? Can it be more funny? Can it be longer? Can it be shorter? And yes, and that is how I learned to work with an editor. My editor at the publisher, I love her. She's brilliant and a wonderful partner. But early on, I just wanted, just for once, I want to do it my way. I just want to do it my way. And I'm happy to change it later when it's done. But along the way, I always think also, how do I know that person is any brighter than I am, any wiser, any smarter than I am? I just don't know. I'm fine with how I write it. And I'm aware, and I'm willing, not just open to, but willing, eager to have it be changed by my editor at the publisher. I rely on it. But along the way, I'll just do it my way. Does that sound selfish?
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's rare these days, because so many writers today are in writers groups, and they write by collaboration. So they share like 3 pages. Tell me what you think. 5 pages. Tell me what you think. And it works for them, but it doesn't work for me at all. I'm with you. I just do the entire thing by myself. I don't want any interference, because I have to figure it out without their input.
Sue Grafton used to tell a great story about this. She didn't have a writers group either. And she used to talk about how she'd always imagined Tolstoy taking Anna Karenina into a writers group. And she had this great Southern accent, Sue Grafton, and that they would say to Tolstoy, oh, honey, you don't want her to go under the train. You don't want that. She wouldn't throw herself under the train. And so Anna Karenina would never have been written. And that's what I fear.
Yeah, and Stephen King is on the same page. I think writers fall into 2 categories: the ones who just have to be alone with the door shut, the blinds down, the entire first draft on their own, and then others who enjoy being in a writers group. I don't like it. I don't do that either. It's just too different.
It's sort of miraculous, because it does show that there's not one way to do it. There's the way that works for you.
Yeah.
And that's the way that works for you. And it doesn't matter what anybody else does or what anybody else tells you about that process. It's just fine the way you do it.
Yeah, whatever works for you. Yeah. All right. Do we have questions, Kimberly, from Zoom, or okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm also the type of person who likes to try to figure out what happens at the end of a movie or a book. How many outcomes do you actually prepare, and how do you decide which outcome you're going to go with in the book?
I just love that question. I think it's so complicated, because I have no outcomes prepared. First of all, I have no outcomes prepared. And isn't that just like how we live? You know, we can prepare the heck out of outcomes, but that's not gonna happen. You know, because there, in real life, there are other things that have an effect on what happens to us. So we can't control that. So all my characters can do is what they can do and hope that the other people involved to do what they hope they do. But what if they don't? You know, what if there's a secret? What if there's something they haven't realized? What if they've made a mistake? What if they've perceived something incorrectly? What if something is not what they thought it was at all, and what they hoped to have happen would be the worst possible thing? What if that? So that's why I just see what happens. And then, you know, the big finish in the big finish of a book where all the elements of the novel that you've had have got to be braided together, and everything has to be resolved. Every question has to be answered. Every red herring has to be dismissed. Every problem has to be solved and fixed. That's the fun part, is you see how can all those things braid together? And how will I leave you, the reader, closing the book and saying, oh, that was a good book. That was And that's what I'm really going for.
Oh, you did that. And then also you say to yourself, I'm not gonna read another book now for a long time, because this is the book in my head, you know? So no, it does, so you definitely achieve that, Hank.
Would Hank consider writing a novel from a male protagonist's point of view?
But I consider writing a novel from a male protagonist's point of view. I've done that. My Jane Ryland series has a dual protagonist, Jane Ryland, who's a television reporter in Boston, who keeps getting fired because she's too honorable and she won't do what a man tells her to do. And the other protagonist in that novel is Jake Brogan. The other point of view character in that novel is Jake Brogan, who's a Boston police detective. So I write Jane's point of view and Jake's point of view. And the difference in writing a man and a woman isn't anything to me. Actually, it's because Jane is a television reporter, and she's a woman and looks at the world in a certain way and has certain experiences and certain knowledge. And Jake is a cop, and he wants a certain thing in the way he looks at the world, and he's trained in a certain way. So, you know, if a woman walks in what Jane would say, oh, look, a white tulle Vera Wang ballerina link wedding dress. And Jake says, she has a white dress. You know, that's because it's in their brain, their perception of the world, is different. But it was really fun to write Jake. It was really fun to sort of feel like, what would a cop think? What would a man think? What would a man who was falling in love with someone maybe think? That was really fun. Good question, Zoom. How do I get my subject matter in the story? Yeah, it all, you know, the world to a reporter, subject matter. The world to a reporter is always new, and it's always different, and it's always, there's like a question mark over everything. Everything could be something. So I take a little, like Magpie, you know, I take a little bit from here and a little bit from there and a little bit from there. And as I was talking about that Rubik's Cube earlier, it sort of goes, and all those little elements of my life click into place, then with the aura of fiction over that. And then it becomes something that never existed before. It just becomes a new story. It's just imagination and storytelling and the endless desire to figure out what happens next and why. And that's what my books are.
Well, what a beautiful note to end on, Hank. And you know, that 14-year-old girl, I think, would be super proud of where she is now. Most individual, right? Yeah, that's a compliment. Yeah. Thank you for being here tonight.
You are perfection. You really are quite amazing. And I have my hand on this book. I want to see what she wrote.
You can read it. Hank is going to be signing books. We have Maxima Books here, selling books. Thank you, Brian, for being such a good friend to the Literary Cafe. Thank you all for coming.
Let me just say one more thing about that. I'm going to just go crazy here, but You know, the holidays are coming. Somebody's going to invite you to Thanksgiving, and you're gonna think, oh, I need a house gift. Signed book, Hanukkah, Christmas, every holiday, a signed book makes a great gift. So just let me remind you of that. And Marjan's books are here as well, which she neglected to tell you, but they are there too as well. Thank you so much. Happy to sign the books to you or to anyone, or for a holiday gift swap or a grab bag, or think about all the moments that you think, oh, I wish I had something, because you don't want to just have to go to that closet and wrap up an old candle. And you know you've done that. So just get a book. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it.